Ha-Seong Kim as a trade candidate makes so much sense for the San Francisco Giants. And as Javier Reyes from Locked On Padres is about to tell us, the trade also could make sense for San Diego.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide episodes 3 days a week for now in off-season mode, but for the rest of the year, every weekday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. So check us out there, and please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And where we get started is just basically teeing up the show. Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres and I basically discussed the possibility of a Ha-Seong Kim trade to the San Francisco Giants. We know the Giants are looking for kind of insurance at the shortstop position. Kim is versatile, great defensively, can play short, can play second, can play third, and I think especially on that left side with Luciano and JD Davis and kind of not necessarily having the firmest grasp on those roles per se, that Ha-Seong Kim just makes so much sense. But we're also going to hear from Javier about why he thinks it also makes sense from the Padres' perspective. So without further delay, here is my conversation with Javier from Locked On Padres.
And I'm being joined by my fellow co-host, or main host, if you're listening to this on the Giants feed, I guess, Ben Kaspick, at Ben Kaspick on Twitter. Giants and statistics and Twitter legend of the Locked On MLB Network. Sir, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. How are you? I mean, first of all, I just got to say, like, I'm everybody else, just waiting on the free agency to get rolling a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I'm anxious for that. It's a year to the day since the Carlos Correa canceled press conference. So really? I'm a little shaken up about that, like PTSD a little bit, but otherwise I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really good, man. And as we are waiting for free agency to get underway, that's crazy. Everybody, you're listening to this episode for Thursday, December 21st, by the way. Forgot to mention that. As we're waiting, you and I figured, well, let's cause some hysteria. You know what I mean? Let's get people all up in a fix, I guess. We are talking today primarily about Ha-Seong Kim. And if you clicked on the video, you know that, because we want to talk about potential trade ideas with Ha-Seong Kim, whether it makes sense for both teams, especially for the Padres, considering that for the Padres' perspective, Ha-Seong Kim is one of the only things that went well last year for the team, frankly. So it's going to be interesting, and I imagine I will get some mean comments. But ladies and gentlemen, also, today's episode, I must let you know, is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get 150 buckaroos and bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. I promise you, you want to bet against the Chargers? Go do that. You'll probably get it. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And to get started with today's show, I'm going to lead with the Padres perspective, because I think that that's the one that will have the most what type of reaction to it when you see this video. Why would the Padres trade Ha-Seong Kim? This is a guy who last year, like I said, was one of the best things that happened for the team. He increased basically across the board in basically every respect. And I'm not just talking about like the fantasy baseball stats. Although that being said, low-key had 38 stolen bases last year. It's like the quietest stolen base machine that I could remember of last year. 17 home runs as well, career high for his MLB career. His walk rate went up from 8.8% the previous season to 12. Strikeout rate went up a little bit, but he balanced that out with the power and the huge increase in his walk rate. 260, 351, 398 slash line, 112 WRC plus, and of course, elite defense, winning a Gold Glove at second base, doing his thing as always. He's been an electric defender, even when he wasn't hitting the ball all that well his rookie year. A very good defensive player. Some of his numbers went down because he just really stunk it up in September. I don't know what happened, but the big thing with Kim last year is that on top of turning more of his fly balls, his pulled fly balls, and his pulled hits into fly balls, and getting more home runs in Petco, clearly loving that left field porch quite a lot. He also just had a better eye at the plate, as evidenced by his walk rate. And I think one of the things that was fascinating is that Kim low-key turned into a leadoff hitter, seeing many more pitches per plate appearance. So everything was great, except for the fact that inexplicably in September, I don't know what happened. He just forgot how to hit. For people who don't know, 36 WRC plus in September, which is what brought some of his numbers overall down. But just like a top 30-ish position player this year, with defense that you can rely on at basically every position, including third base, which he doesn't have to play all that often because Manny Machado's there. And then you could also play shortstop and second base. And I wouldn't be surprised if he could play the outfield somehow too. He can't, but still, I'm just cracking jokes here.
You're describing my perfect player, which is why we're talking today.
Exactly.
The way you're saying that, you're like, my listeners are just like all ears.
The ultimate platoon for utility infielder.
Well, utility, just the versatility, because, we'll get into it, but yeah.
And with that all said, you might be wondering, well, why the heck would the Padres trade this guy? Well, the most obvious thing is, if you've been paying attention to the offseason so far, the Padres have been shedding salary. Now, you can go listen to my video about the Padres' lack of spending, although apparently they might be getting Yuki Matsui from the, I forgot what the Eagle team, I forgot what they are from Japan, but might be getting him. Even still, the Padres have been shedding salary. They obviously traded away Juan Soto. They got rid of Matt Carpenter, and Josh Hader and Blake Snell are free agents. They might not be re-signed at all. I am not as negative on that front, but I do think that it does raise questions for this year. Not necessarily the long future, but for this year. And Ha-Seong Kim currently, he's not getting paid a whole lot of money, which is awesome if you're trying to save money. And he's got one more year left on his deal. His original deal was 4 years, $28 million that he signed back in 2021. And after this season, there's a mutual option, which I imagine he would be looking to take, or I don't know what would happen there necessarily. It's a mutual option. I thought it was a club option or a player option. Whatever.
It's mutual.
Anyway.
And so based on the way he's played, $8 million, if he had another season like this, he would just be like, no thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
Hit the market. Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. I think that with Ha-Seong Kim and considering this team and wanting to save money, I think the reason that the Padres would want to trade him is, one, he's a very good player. So if you're trying to be shifty and selling high, not to say that I think he's going to be worse at all. I think September was weird for him. I think that you could get a good amount from this guy. And this is a team that has struggled with depth for a while. And I understand that people will be frustrated because this guy has not just been a good player, but one of the easiest players to root for. And that includes Tatis, because Tatis has been weird off the field with some of his stuff. He's one of the easiest players to root for on the entire team. He's a joy to watch. He's always smiling and he's getting better. And apparently talks smack in Spanish, which means I love him even more, according to Nick Martinez, which is just hilarious. That's the language he chooses for that. And I think the other matter of this is, yes, the Padres are shedding salary, but I think the really important component to this, Ben, and for Padres listeners, is they have a fellow by the name of Jake Cronenworth, who's currently the first baseman for the team. And Jake Cronenworth, while he was bad last year and he was hurt, as a second baseman, this is a guy that was top 5 in F-WAR ever since the 2020 season, before last year. That means he wasn't up there with like the Altuves and Marcus Simeons of the world, but he was still really, really good. And last year, he only had one F-WAR. And part of that is because his numbers, when you put them up to what you're supposed to get out of a first baseman, and you don't get the stuff that you get from being a great defensive player, which Cronenworth has shown oftentimes that he is particularly at second base, it's going to go down. So unless Cronenworth hits the way he hit in 2020, which is like a 126 WRC plus guy, then even that at first base isn't going to be great because he doesn't have all the power. He doesn't have the power.
That's exactly. I'm going to just say, I said this last offseason to you. that these weird the fact that you're moving Cronenworth to first just severely cuts into his value. And sure enough, yes, I'll let you finish. But
No,
yes, moving
it's
him back to second base makes so much sense.
and you got a lot of
them.
flack for that. And I do remember that vividly, where it was just more of a thing of, look, it's not fantasy baseball. There's so many people that were playing different positions. And what's so funny is it wasn't them not knowing how to play the position. They all were great. Tatis literally won a platinum glove. You know what I'm saying? So it wasn't the actual playing position. It was just the glut that the Padres now have. People have made the shortstop joke plenty of times. Tatis, I think, helped amend that issue just a little bit because he's clearly an amazing outfielder at this point. But you have this situation where the Padres extended Jay Cronenworth in what, in my opinion, is the worst move of AJ Preller's tenure. I know all the Hosmer people. I know. I actually think that this is worse than that because I don't know who they were bidding against. I don't know who they were bidding against. Yeah. At least I feel like I can see a world where people are bidding out Hosmer.
I mean, as a second baseman, though, Cronenworth, I don't mean to cut you off, but
go for it.
Yeah, he had a down year. And that contract, if you're like, no, they should just trade Cronenworth. Well, you're not going to be able to because of the contract and the way he played. And so they need to move him back to second base, and he needs to reestablish some value if they were to want to trade him. But ideally, like you said, from the Padres' perspective, he would just go back to being good defensively at a premium position and hitting and under contract for a long time. Because right now, you're not getting anything in return given the contract that he signed.
And I could relitigate that for days. Again, I don't know who they were bidding against. I don't know why he was getting worse every year. And he decided now was not just a 5-year extension, not just a 4-year, but a 7-year extension. Doesn't make any sense. And for Padres fans saying, well, we got to trade him. Yeah, and then move him to first too on top of that. And you might be wondering, well, he didn't slash that well. Well, he actually did 110 WRC plus in 2022 when he was playing in the infield. Good for a 4.2 F4. He's good. He's a good player. And I would have to believe that putting him back in the infield might be better for him. However, the big thing here is it's going to be very hard to trade Jay Cronenworth. You have to look at teams like the Rockies and just hope they bite. You know what I mean? One of those type of teams that are just crazy because it's a long-term commitment to a player that I think a lot of teams would like this guy. If he wasn't under contract, you could get something for Jay Cronenworth. I actually think quite easily because teams would be like, oh, I got an idea. Let's put him not at first base. That's how we'll get more from him. But since he has that contract, you would have to, we have to attach prospects to get rid of him. That to me, Padres fans, reminds me, we just mentioned it before, the same situation we were in with Eric Hosmer, where you would have to attach prospects and this and that. And instead, what ended up happening? You had to do the giant Soto trade, and then you had to still paying for him next season. So you're not going to be able to get a team, even if the AAV isn't as big, to pay for this guy, especially in a league filled with teams like the Orioles, who won't spend, even though they won 100 games, to spend on a guy like this. And if you were to do that, all of a sudden you move Cronenworth to second base. Maybe he's that 3 to 4 win player again. And then you get a different first baseman, move things around. You have a little bit more room to operate in. And considering that Ha-Seong Kim is, potentially, you don't have him locked down for next year, I think it's a move to at least consider. And I think that with the Padres as well, I know that this is upsetting to everyone, but this is why I didn't understand the Cronenworth thing. You kind of made your bed with this. If you hadn't done this, you could extend Ha-Seong Kim. If you hadn't done this, you could just let them chill and just go with that. This is what happens when you overcommit to the present. But we're going to talk a little bit more about this, especially from the Giants side, do some mock trades and let Ben talk more. Because I've been talking the whole damn time. My gosh. But before we get into that, everybody, I want to talk to you about our good friends over at FanDuel. They're fantastic. We love FanDuel. We've been partnering with them for a long time. And again, look, here's the thing. We're in the midst of the NFL season. Mike McDaniel, he's getting mad at everyone asking him questions about the Dolphins and how they can't beat teams over 500. He said, F off, he says. And that's a direct quote. Well, guess what? I highly suggest you betting on the Cowboys, I think, this week, because the Dolphins just don't tend to beat the good teams, especially after a bad loss by the Cowboys this past week. That's my recommendation for your money line bet. And here's the thing. Why am I recommending it to you? Because over at FanDuel right now, customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. It's 150 buckaroos if your team wins. So again, I am recommending picking those Cowboys. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, though, no better time than now. not just money line bets, spreads, player props, over-unders, and a whole lot more. So again, go visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off your NFL season of betting. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, we are back here on the Locked On Padres and Locked On Giants podcasts, the latter of which you might not know because I've been speaking the whole time. But don't worry, Ben will be speaking at this point because I have to ask you, Ben. I basically broke down what's going on with the Padres in this potential trade. And for the record, this doesn't mean I think that they need to do it. But for those reasons I outlined, I think you have to at least consider it. And I think it would be a savvy move for a GM who has been inconsistent with savvy moves, tends to buy high on a lot of things. So I think it'd be interesting if he did a sell high. Ben, what exactly makes Ha-Seong Kim, do you think, the perfect fit for the Giants?
The thing is, there are so many different reasons. It's not just one thing in particular. I mean, we could start with the fact that, like you said, over the last couple of seasons, he's low-key been one of the more valuable players in the game, in large part due to his defensive abilities. And the Giants, for the last 2 years, have had disappointing seasons in large part due to defensive issues, especially in the infield. And they also have like the #1 ground ball pitching staff in the game. Logan Webb,
pretty good, yeah. Have you
Alex
seen
Cobb,
an expected ERA? My gosh.
yeah, and like Alex Cobb 2 years ago, we talked about it at the time. Like the expected numbers were so much better because the infield couldn't. It wasn't just errors. It was just like they just couldn't field behind the guy, and like all season long. And and we're not just talking about a guy who's like, okay, well, he plays this one particular position, and the Giants happen to have that position open. What the Giants have is uncertainty, but yet like possibilities at a couple of different spots. I think at first base, Ha-Seong Kim's value would be wasted, just like Jake Cronenworth's value was wasted, and just like we discussed a year ago, almost to the day probably. At second base, they've got Tyro Estrada pretty entrenched there. But the guy needs days off, right? Okay. But we shift to the left side of the diamond, and Brandon Crawford, for the first time since debuting in 2011, he's a free agent, and it's very unlikely to me that he returns, given the lack of production the last couple of seasons, including defensive decline, and just looking at his age, his time in San Francisco is probably over. They do have a prospect in Marco Luciano, who has at times been considered, a top 10 prospect in the game. Some people have kind of cooled on him based on minor league performance the last couple of years, but he did make his major league debut in 2023. And so he is a guy under consideration for like opening day shortstop, that role. But at the same time, you don't want to overplay your hand there and put all your eggs in the basket of a prospect who may not pan out. I mean, what if the guy like completely struggles out of the gates and that's your plan and you've got no alternative? No, they've been vocal about their need for some insurance at that position. And then you look over to third base, where they had a pretty nice kind of season from JD Davis. But at the same time, he's not necessarily a guy that you want to overcommit to being. He did kind of seem to wear down as the season went on. He started off great, but actually the whole Giants offense was like historically bad starting in late June through the whole rest of the season. Like they were so bad. But JD Davis was just part of that. Everybody randomly, Wilmer Flores was like Babe Ruth that whole time, but everybody else was horrible. Just side note, it was hilarious. It made no sense. But basically, so like at shortstop, Ha-Seong Kim, it would just be tremendous insurance if a guy like Marco Luciano doesn't perform, or maybe you let Luciano kind of start in AAA and just get on a roll before you call him up. And then if you do call him up and maybe JD Davis I don't know. The Giants have a lot of versatile players, and so someone
Yeah,
like
it's
JD
interchangeable.
Davis,
Yeah.
he could play first base
Mm,
in a platoon with Lamont Wade, who platoons. They also don't have like a clear DH with Jock Peterson reaching free agency, and so
hmm
that position is kind of flexible and open. And so guys like JD Davis, like you could clear out that third base if like you said, Ha-Seong Kim, he can play third, he can play short. If Tyro Estrada were to go down like he did, he fractured his hand this season and missed a month, and they tried guys from their minor league system, and it just didn't go well, and that was part of their collapse was when certain guys went down, the guys that they had filling in didn't do a good job. And so anyway, just having a versatile player in a 162 game season who can give you elite defense at these premium infield positions would just be, I mean, now, I'm actually remembering outfield, I think was more actually of a problem defensively
hmm
this season, but
Yeah.
nonetheless, like getting an elite defender, uh, the Giants just need to improve their defense because it just hasn't done them any favors the last couple of years overall. And plus, Kim thrived, like you mentioned, the last couple of years. And who was his manager? It was Bob Melvin,
Yeah.
right? And now Bob Melvin is the
I was
manager of
waiting
the
for you to bring
Giants.
that up. Yeah.
And not only that, I could keep going. The Giants just signed Jung Hoo Lee out of
hmm
Korea for $113 million.
hmm
And Lee and Kim are friends. And Lee just said he hopes to play with Ha-Seong Kim. And Kim told him, you're going to be playing for a great manager in Bob Melvin. And so there's just so many reasons that
Bob.
this makes sense
hmm
from the Giants' perspective. And then, like you mentioned, like it's kind of complicated from the Padres' perspective, but like you said, it's not like they must trade Ha-Seong Kim, but
Yeah.
it's for all the reasons you mentioned. I agree with you 100% just by saying it's worth considering.
Yeah.
And so there you have it. I think there's the potential for a deal. The question is, do the teams see it that way, and would they deal
hmm
with each other given that they're division rivals, et cetera, et cetera? And so that's what I'm interested to kind of get into next. It's like, what would the Padres be looking for specifically? But I mean, we've seen it from the other side as Giants fans, all the smiling and my God, like from the minute Kim showed up, his defensive ability,
Yeah.
he's one of the better like infield defenders I've ever seen. Like just
It's amazing.
the way that he fields and the way that he throws,
The release is
just
amazing. Yeah.
everything, every throw is perfect, and so slick. Just
It's
I
smooth.
just
It's
yeah,
smooth. It's like
it's so
genuinely
smooth.
like, and this makes us sound like baseball like weirdos. We are, for the record, but it's just like, yeah, I'm the type of person. Like I remember being at Yankee Stadium for one of the games, because I'm secretly a Yankees fan, as all Padres fans know. That I remember watching that, and like it was just a great diving play, and seeing the speed with which he throws. I don't think that he's necessarily the guy with the biggest arm strength in the entire league. Not that that
No,
always matters, but it's clearly does not for him, because the way he releases the ball, gets rid of it quickly, he gets in position, and again, he could play second and short, and he could also be a leadoff hitter, as I illustrated in the first segment. I think that he's like one of those guys who's like one of the most valuable players, not in the league. Here's what I should say. I think he's one of the most valuable trade pieces in the league, because I think every team is like, you probably don't have to give up a ton for him. He doesn't
right.
make a lot, and he could play multiple positions. And at the very minimum, even if he regresses to a 107 WRC plus guy or whatever he was in 2022, he's an amazing defender. Like even when he couldn't hit, he's an amazing defender. So I think that there's so many intriguing possibilities here, man.
and
I really do.
and the steals, like, and
Yeah,
that's another component. The
just
Giants were
low key hit
last.
steals.
He probably like the Giants. I don't have
Great
the
base
number
runner.
pulled
Yeah.
up. The Giants were last in stolen bases in 2023. They were just an old team, a slow team.
Yeah.
He may have had the Giants had as a team 57 steals last year.
My
The
God.
next closest team had 72. So they were last by a lot. And
Mhm.
you're saying he had 38?
They need some youth. They need some young vigor
And
and
speed.
energy. And speed is one of
Yes.
those areas. And I think that
Yes.
for them, the real question is going to be also like, what would a trade package look like, and
Right.
how would this necessarily come afoot? Because it's hard to do in division trades. Heck, if the Yankees and Red Sox could do it, then so could the Giants and Padres. You know what I mean?
True.
So we're going to talk about
True.
that in just a second, guys. But before we do that, just take a second to listen to a word from some of our sponsors. And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, just back in a snap, just like that, we are back talking Ha-Seong Kim here on the Locked On Padres and Locked On Giants podcasts. Ben, from my perspective, let's just jump right into it. Let's do this. We've been talking long enough. I think that what the Padres need is pitching and outfield. So I don't think that it has to be giant people either. Yesterday, if anybody wants to go check out, I did my low end under the radar targets. I talked about some bullpen guys like Kane and Milton and Jordan Hicks and et cetera, et cetera. Dylan Floro, I think, is another one. Starting pitchers like James Paxton. But all that aside, I think that the Giants could potentially have that. Before we do that, though, I want to selfishly ask for one of my boys. There's two people that the Giants have had. One of them more recently, but another one they've had for a decent amount of time that I've been randomly obsessed with. That was Alex Wood. I don't know why. I'm just so convinced this is a 3-win pitcher. I just don't know what year it will be. I will take that with me to the grave. But anyway,
He's a free agent, by the way.
I know
you
he's
could
a free
just
agent.
sign him.
I know.
Take him,
I know.
please.
And then with, yeah, I know he was not
Giants
good last
fans.
year.
Oh my gosh,
not good.
Giants fans are like, oh my god, please let him join the Padres.
maybe it was like maybe I'm doing like osmosis, like Anthony DeSclafani. I'm like, I have this vibe that for some reason Alex Wood can be just like that because he pitched next to him. I don't know.
I mean, they were
can't defend
both
this
really
take.
good in 2021 for the Giants. Like really good. And
I can't fully defend this take, but whatever. The other player is Michael Conforto, who I've been obsessed with. I just, now he wasn't amazing for the Giants last year. He flirted with some moments, but just for the record, his numbers last year, let me see if I can pull this up. He had a 100 WRC plus exactly and 15 home runs, which was quite off from what he usually did. This is a guy who's hit upwards of 30 before, 28 a couple times, been a really good power hitter with good plate discipline. Did not happen that first year. Would Michael Conforto at all be a player that the Giants would be willing to give up? Because I think that with the Padres having dealt not just Wanso, but also Trent Grisham and having a lot of unproven, although intriguing talent with guys like Jacob Marcy and Jackson Merrill as their kind of farm system guys, would Michael Conforto at all be a player that could come to me, my beloved, my guy that I'm convinced is like a 7-win player for some reason?
I mean, Javi, 100%, 100%, yes, because, and this trade makes too much sense. Like this pairing of these two teams makes too much sense because the Giants have 9 outfielders on their 40-man roster, and almost all of them are like guys with like who have been in the major leagues, like either obviously guys like Conforto and Haniger, Yastrzemski, Slater, but then guys like younger guys in the form of Wade Meckler and Luis Matos, who's considered a good prospect. They just signed Jung Hoo Lee, like I said, for 113 million. I'm not sure I mentioned Haniger as well, and so plus like I mentioned, versatility. Lamont Wade was an outfielder for a couple years and has historically played outfield quite a bit. Tyro Estrada has played some outfield. Brett Wisely, Blake Sable, who was like a catcher and an outfielder. So they are flooded with outfielders, and so 100%, like they can, if Conforto's the guy that AJ Preller wants, it's doable. Like they need to reduce from their outfield mix. Like I think that I don't want to say have to, but it would make a lot of sense to trade an outfielder. And I think that the Yastrzemski and Slater kind of pairing as a platoon is a really good one. And then you've got Jung Hoo Lee's going to be like an everyday center fielder. You don't pay a guy $113 million to platoon. And then you've got basically one more spot, and you've got Conforto. You've also got Haniger. You've got the DH spot. But like I said, Wilmer Flores was like exceptional for the Giants last year, and he doesn't really have a spot unless he's platooning Anyway, it gets complicated with all their
Hmm.
versatility, but absolutely Conforto or any of the other outfielders I just named. Plus, they happen to be deep in young pitching as well,
Hmm.
and so there you could pair. And I don't know about. I read somewhere today that the Padres were possibly seeking catching depth, but Joey Bart probably just lost his
Yeah.
role with the Giants. Former top prospect, maybe a guy worth kind of taking a flyer on
Hmm.
there because the Giants have Patrick Bailey, who
Yeah.
emerged as a stud, and then they just signed Tom Murphy to a multi-year contract. And so the
Yeah.
writing is on the wall for Bart. I don't know if there's interest there for the Padres, but young pitching, outfield, and Joey Bart. Those are kind of the guys, the groups of guys that are most likely to be dealt in any deal for because their Giants are probably going to trade for someone who can play shortstop, whether it's
Yeah.
Kim or somebody else, and that's who's available.
Or you maybe could sign Tim Anderson. Take a flyer on that guy. I
They've
mean,
they've been
there's
pretty clear
flyers
like
out
that
there, man.
that the intention is like to trade for
Mhm.
for
Okay.
because they don't want Tim Anderson. Like,
I, I
he
just think
had such a bad year, man.
Tim Anderson fills my so bad, but I don't believe it box. I'm like, this is,
Yeah.
you don't decline by 50 points randomly one year. Like, I don't know if he's a good player, but it has to be better than what he did last year. That's why I'm kind of high
Yeah.
on Tim Anderson.
But
Padres don't
but
need him,
Kim is
obviously, but
good. I think that what
Mhm.
they want is someone who's actually like just currently good because they
And the
have
floor is higher too.
enough. The floor is exceptionally high because
Yeah.
of the defense.
Hmm.
And the Giants, they want to win. Like they don't
Hmm.
want to be winning 79, 81 games. Like they want to win. And so they're willing to give up some talent if it means getting a good player. And
Hmm.
that's what we're looking at here. And when we're talking Kim, I'm not saying, yeah, just send him over here because you need to get rid of him. I'm saying, no,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
realize this is a good player and we're willing to give you fair value for it because it makes so much sense for our roster. That's the situation.
I'm in on Conforto. I would almost do this straight up for him. Now that's because
Oh,
I have a little
done.
bit of a bias because I just think Michael Conforto. I promise you, I smell it. Know it's still in there, man. He just had a weird year and he came off of an injuries, guys. I'm
It's
all in
true.
on Michael Conforto, but I imagine something else would be involved since at the present moment, Ha-Seong Kim infinitely better of a player than Michael Conforto just based on last year,
And
obviously. Even if
cheaper.
you just go and cheaper and all that stuff, so that would depend. That's where it might not line up, is if you are trading him and paying a little bit more for Michael Conforto. I wouldn't see that. I don't know what Lamont Wade is getting paid, but
Like
that's where it
three
gets a little bit
million
different
bucks.
because that would be a big win for the Padres. But he's also much better and was discount Juan Soto for not the whole year, but a good portion of the Giants season before
It's
their
true.
offense hit a rut. He was like
Everybody
a 400 on base
collapsed.
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I think it happened. But otherwise, it would be for depth pieces. I don't think the Giants necessarily have any farm system pieces that the Padres would covet all that much. But if you have relievers, if you have an outfielder you throw in there, I think that could make a lot of sense for the Padres and potentially allow you to then. The key here is not just getting a Michael Conforto player. It is also, what if this helps you unlock Cronenworth, because you're not doing anything with him. You're not.
Hmm.
Like, I'm sorry to break it to you guys, you can't. If this was a 3-year deal, sure. If he wasn't signed, you could get so much for Cronenworth in the grand scheme of things right now. But since you're probably stuck with him, I would elect to not abandon ship and instead say, all right, fine, let's test this out. If they move him to second base next year and he stinks again, then we can start talking about, all right, maybe we just have to figure out a way to dump this guy. It's a sunken cost at the end. But for now, my thing is, I want to see if he could still give that value in second base. And if you do that, you trade for someone, then you have Michael Conforto starting in left field, occasionally doing DH stuff, depending if they get someone else. And then you go get Rhys Hoskins to fill in for first base for a year. And that would be my master framework of an idea. So again,
Yeah.
the big thing for why this makes sense, what Ben just mentioned, defense has been killing the Giants. I mean, it murdered Alex Cobb's season from, 2022.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at that guy's numbers, first of all, I don't like using WAR for pitchers as much as other stats, but 3.7 WAR that year. because his FIP and xFIP were just below in the basement, right? And this year
Right.
he was effective, but not quite as much, which is hilarious. So it's almost like you lost that year. And Logan
Right.
Webb is just a strikeout dude who I believe among like the top pitchers has like the highest ground ball rate in the league. And that
Yes.
would be conducive to Kim's skill set. So it really fits there. And then for the Padres, it's not just for some potential, what rumored is backup catcher help, whatever. I think Higashioka's fine as their backup catcher, but also some potential outfield help that we don't put as much pressure to have your Jacob Marcy prospect or Jackson Merrill prospect. And instead you bring in my beloved Michael Conforto, hit 30 home runs for you. And then more importantly, the last part is the Cronenworth move. You're almost trading for Cronenworth in a
Yes.
way. You know what I mean? Like you could be doing that if you do move Kim, because you're not moving Bogaerts to first. Enough of that story. That story is
It
ridiculous.
never it got they put I'm
I know.
mad on Padres fans'
I know.
behalf because you and I said this. Like, why didn't it just made no sense to me because
I
just
don't think any of the moves are bad in a vacuum. The problem is they did all of them at once. If you're going to
right.
sign Bogaerts, why are you extending Cronenworth? If you want to extend Cronenworth, why are you signing Bogaerts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And that's what the problem is.
Because it put people, to put a guy whose value so much comes from defense at the like least premium defensive position on the field never made any sense.
It was like,
And
are you hoping for him to bounce back to his 2020 level? Cool.
even
I'm
so,
hopeful, but even if he did that, is he going to be the same value player as some others? I mean, we're going up against Freddie Freeman. You know what I mean?
it's
We're
just
going up against all sort of first baseman in the National League. So just,
it,
my God,
oof,
it just never
never
made a
made
whole lot
sense.
of sense. But alas, ladies and gentlemen, that is my idea. And I think that is why just a Michael Conforto throw in some random reliever. I don't know. I just like saying random reliever a lot because every team has a random reliever that can help out. That is an area. Or they could sign my beloved Keenan Middleton, who I alluded to earlier. Everybody
Giants,
go check out that episode.
Giants could eat some money too. Like we said, Conforto was costing 18 million, Kim only
Yeah.
8, and the Giants would probably happily like pay down 10
Mm-hmm.
million bucks, make Kim 18 million, make Conforto 8,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
sweeten the deal there.
Exactly. That can make a lot of sense. The Giants, for a multitude of reasons, just don't have that payroll right now, but they're not a team that is opposed to payroll. Clearly,
No,
that's just how it works.
they're
Right?
they're out
Yeah.
here trying to sign
Hey,
Yoshinobu
they had
Yamamoto as we
Correa.
speak.
They
Yeah.
had Correa for a week?
A
Question
week.
mark? A week.
A week.
Like
Yes.
clearly, the Giants. This is not. That's what's so interesting is you're not going to be able to move some other players, but the Giants are the type that could absolutely help out with that. So, Ben, I really like it. I really do. I think that this would make a lot of sense for both teams. Obviously, there's risk here because there's a little bit more known quantity in Ha-Seong Kim, but because of the Cronenworth thing, if all of a sudden, if you're getting really nerdy about it, the Padres are getting 5 wins out of this, if you can include Cronenworth, and then if Conforto has a bounce back, and then you do something at first base, I think it's, as Peter Brand and Moneyball would say, I think it's good you got Ha-Seong Kim off your team. I think it opens up all kinds of exciting possibilities. Not as much. I think that would more fits the Juan Soto for that analogy. But even so, ladies and gentlemen, with that all being said, that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves, as well as the Locked On Giants podcast. Ben, before we close things out, tell the people what you're up to.
I can never answer this question. I'm always just like, no, I got nothing.
You got nothing.
I mean, what do you
like
mean?
asking it anyway.
Oh, yeah, you always put me on the spot. At Ben Kaspic on X, Locked On Giants, your team every day, but 3 days a week for right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just like you said earlier, Twitter or X, I like to be active there. So check me out if you haven't there already.
Absolutely.
And what about you? What do my listeners need to know?
At Javapeno on Twitter, JAVIIPENO, the best handle on the Locked On LB network, the best handle in the game. But Ben does have some of the best baseball tweets. I like them very much. Very informative. So go check that out. In terms of my pod, next week, all I know for now is probably going to talk about Dylan Cease because why not? Everybody else is doing it. So we'll talk about the Padres trading away stuff, and then I'll talk about who the Padres could trade for because why not? They're the Padres. We've got the wild man, Sheriff Cowboy John Wayne extraordinaire, and AJ Preller. So that should be a lot of fun. Otherwise, I will see. But for Giants fans, the They're gregarious giants. I don't know. I don't know what GI word.
You
You know what I
tried
mean?
this
That rhymes
before.
with giants. I tried it before and I forgot again.
You
I
said
forgot to write-
gregarious.
Did I say gregarious last time?
Yes. And
Amazing.
You were like,
Amazing
I
stuff.
don't know why I said that.
Amazing stuff. And on that note, everybody, stay safe and of course stay faithful for our faithful homies and gregarious Giants fans. Until next time, take care.